So, warning, this is not hard analytics. This is more of a social science presentation, so please bear with us, okay? So, Evan and I come to you from the City University of New York. We're housed at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and we are very excited to be working on an evaluation of a program called Cure Violence. So, Cure Violence, so we know that gun violence is a big problem in the US, and what Cure Violence tries to do is a public health approach to reducing shootings and killings. They work in very targeted areas, right? So what they do is they treat violence as if it was an infectious disease, and they hire credible messengers, so people re-entering their communities from prison or from the criminal justice system, and based on that credibility, they go find the people who are mostly infected. So those who are most likely to be the shooters and the killers or the victims, and they work with them as much as they can to try to bring their risk level down. And once that happens, the hope is that those norms are going to get transmitted to their extended network, right? So that's in a nutshell what Cure Violence does. Now, our research and our evaluation study is if we only try to work with the participants of the programs, then the theory of the model is not supported, because what it says is that it's going to denormalize violence in a targeted area, and it's going to bring down the levels of shootings and killings. So our study focuses on secondary transmission of norms amongst a network of at-risk young males. So this is all being done in New York City. Here's a little bit of our methodology. So what we did is we selected 2 areas. So this is New York City. Now we have 2 areas. We've selected 2 areas in the Bronx. These areas are usually 10 by 10 block radius. So one of the areas is going to be the implementation, and the other one is a comparison. And now 2 areas in Brooklyn, one is going to get the intervention and one is not. And what we're doing is interviewing young males, 18 to 30 years old, in those communities, right? In both the implementation and comparison, and we're hoping that if the area that gets the intervention will see different levels of violence in those areas in comparison to the areas that are not getting the intervention, okay? So we have built a survey, and this survey is being conducted. We're using iPads, and we're using an application called QuickTab Survey. This is in an effort to reduce a lot of the user human error when you're entering data into a spreadsheet. So our instrument consists of respondent characteristics, social capital, collective efficacy, perceptions of neighborhood safety, and one of the most important things here is the propensity to violence. So we're giving them scenarios. We ask them, if somebody was to step on your brand new shoe, what's the worst that you'd be willing to do when to respond to it, right? And our violence scale goes from 1 to 0. 1 means I ignore. 1 to 10. 1 means I ignore, and 10 means that's the furthest I'd be willing to go on this scale. So that means you probably would kill the person. Okay. So how are we doing this? We're using respondent-driven sampling, and so we collect 1 seed. We recruit 1 seed. So we go to the neighborhood, we find a person that fits the characteristics of our study population. Then we talk to them, we ask him to participate in the study, we pay him $30, that's the incentive. And then we ask him to help us recruit other people like him. So which means people who live in that specific targeted area and who are between those ages, from 18 to 30 years old. Now that person will bring his 3 friends, and then those 3 friends will get another 3 sets of coupons each, and so they each have the opportunity to make a total of $60, okay, for their participation in the study. Okay, and so now I'm going to go into the preliminary results, and I think Evan is going to go ahead and do this.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things about asking people about when they get violent is there is a level of social desirability. It means that because you're asking people, they try to guess what you want to hear. And so a common technique when you're asking people questions that make them uncomfortable is you don't ask them about themselves exclusively. You also ask them about their friends. So one of the pilot study, or one of the most famous examples of this, is asking people about sharing needles. So you wouldn't think that people who use heroin norm to like what people's social expectation is. But in fact, when you ask people, do you share needles, they almost invariably say no, right? But if you really want to find out the best estimator of what their practice is, you ask them if their friends share needles, because it's easier for them to answer truthfully about what their friends do or their peers rather than what they do, because they feel shame about this. So I apologize for the small print, but people were very willing to admit to the top 3 scenarios. So somebody takes a swing at you, people are willing to say that they would engage violently back. They would, you see a guy on the street who beat up your brother, I'm very willing to engage. And you can see that these are scenarios which we would expect most people to react in an aggressive manner. You're on your way outside to a party outside of your neighborhood, somebody takes a swing at you, what are you going to do? Now, as people's median reaction gets lower, so they're willing to only react verbally or react physically or ignore it, the difference between what they say and what they think their friends would do actually widens. And again, there's a large body of literature that says the best estimator of what you're actually going to do is what you think your friends would do. So if, there's a lot of jokes about high school, right? If you think that everybody in your high school is doing drugs, then there's a good chance that you're going to do drugs. If you think that nobody is doing it, then you're less likely to engage in that kind of risky behavior. Same with early onset sexual activity. So this is a fairly large thing. Now, we are only at the beginning of this research, right? So in another 2 years, we'll have more, different waves of the survey. But what I can tell you is there is some support in the data that we have for this model of cure violence. And one of the things is that there is not a lot of faith in civil institutions in these neighborhoods. So people do not overwhelmingly think that if they call the police are going to help. Okay? And in fact, it's actually the fire department that does the best as far as faith in civil institutions. If the building is on fire, the fire department will come, they will put out the fire. But police and local leaders and politicians, this community is very disengaged from. They are not at all sure whether or not they're going to help. And although the numbers are not overwhelming, it is interesting to me that you don't see symmetry on the negative side of this data, right? So if people are less inclined to think that civil institutions will not be helpful, they are more sure that they're not going to be helpful. So I at least found that interesting. One of the tenets of cure violence that is different from law enforcement-based public safety programs is that they expect that the people who are most likely to be the victims of violence are also the people demographically most likely to commit violence. Now, if you've been around police or sometimes people with hard-bitten senses of humor, they call those they call those public service murders, right? Because it's one drug dealer killing another. These are people involved in a criminal lifestyle. Well, one of the things that we asked was, have you been shot at? Have you been stabbed? Now, just quickly, in this room, has anybody been stabbed? Has anybody? Okay, all right. Well, one, and has anyone been shot at? Okay, so we also found that more people had been shot at than stabbed. Our surveys range from about 27% to 40%. We found a large number of this population had been stabbed, about 18%, with a variance of about 3%. And one of the more interesting things is even at these low sample numbers, we find that people's violent ideation is significantly greater if they have been the victim of personal violence, even in this area. And the final thing I wanted to show you, and this will come as a surprise to absolutely nobody, is that people's violent ideation is greater when they are disconnected from social control. If you don't have a job, or having a job and something to lose means that you think about or you consider the consequences of your actions more carefully than if you are out of the labor force. Okay, but this is Python, and I wanted to show you at least something on Python.
So that doesn't seem to be a very big effect.
Well, this is, unlike the other one where it was already statistically significant, a sample size of 200, this one is not statistically significant yet, but we anticipate another 800, so I thought it was worth showing, and it was also correctly ordered. So I'm hoping that as the sample size increases, we'll see narrower bands.
The difference in the numbers is not that.
Yeah, the y-axis was like 2 to 2.4.
2.3.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So it's a 5-point axis. Ignore, react verbally, react physically, draw a weapon, use a weapon. Most people we had relatively few people who were willing to use a weapon, so it's actually that kind of movement is actually reasonable, and yeah, that's it.
Just say something real quick. So you don't have the file, so you can't actually.
I didn't give you the shape file.
Let me hop in very briefly. So we had a lot of technical difficulties getting started. It is, so maybe just take a few minutes doing this, and or I don't know, Eliza, do you want to cede a little bit of time to allow the demo?
No. I think since we don't have the shape file, I mean, I was going to show basically a GeoPandas example of this, but since the shape file isn't in here, we can't really live code it. So I think we'll just cut to questions now if anybody has them.
But you have the figures?
You just don't run.
Oh, sure. So.
Just scroll down the next.
Yeah. So this is, so one of the more interesting things is this is the shooting index in, this is an exponentially weighted average of shootings in New York City for every census tract last 4 years, with an exponential decay of 10% per year from 2010 to 2013. And what's interesting here is, about half of the census tracts in New York City had no shootings at this time during this period at all. And then the majority of it was concentrated in the North Bronx and Harlem, the northern edge of Staten Island, which you see there, and a lot in central Brooklyn and South Jamaica. And that's where our programs are. And I was going to show the map over a leaflet, but since I don't have the shape file, I'm not going to do that. Okay, any questions?
First, perhaps a round of applause. And then maybe we'll just take 5 minutes.